Chapter 8. Yawning, Sophia stared blankly at the open book in front of her and swirled a straw through a pineapple peach smoothie. She, Mona, and Xavier had batted ideas around for the bulk of the evening. Mostly she tried to determine plans for Halloween night and worried out a new strategy of attack to gather ingredients for the gypsy potion. A headache on Sophia's part resulted when her traitorous roommate took it upon herself to plead Xavier's case yet again. She'd capitulated, saying she'd already consigned herself to the cause, and in the interest of peace, harmony, and health, she sent Xavier and Mona out to dinner. Their constant optimistic chatter annoyed her to distraction. She needed an escape option should Sterling find out about Xavier's paranormal status. Wasn't a matter of if, it was now a matter of when. With a sigh, she focused on the words. Generally in fiction, the most common cause of lycanthropy is to be bitten by a werewolf or another person suffering from the same malady. In other cases, lycanthropy is not given any specific cause other than being generally attributed to magic, which may be a supernatural instinct, in some cases voluntary or involuntary by means of a curse. Mental weakness is also a cause. The psychological state of a human has been shown to make them believe they are indeed a werewolf. Did that mean because of the curse Xavier could choose when he turned into the animal? Or did it mean he had no choice but to become the animal? She flipped ahead a few pages and didn't find an answer. Why weren't textbooks more concise? Finishing the smoothie, she shut the book. She couldn't concentrate on the text while worries consumed her mind. Namely Xavier. Especially Xavier. Did he truly believe the universe had thrown them together? Did she? Moreover, if she did, what did that mean for her future? Could she give in and let herself hope for a different reality away from Sterling? So would they. A crash, then the tinkling sound of breaking glass jarred into her reflection. She shot out of her chair and ran to the front door just in time to see Mona attempt to drag Xavier's semi-conscious form over the doorstep. What happened? How could you have possibly gotten into trouble over dinner? She helped the slider woman haul him into the living room, then knelt beside the fallen man. His chest heaved with the effort to breathe. What the hell did you do to him? Sophia touched his sweaty forehead. There was no fever, but he was deathly pale. Everything was fine when we sat down. Once we started eating, Xavier began to act strange. Mona hovered around him, finally sinking to her knees. I didn't know what to do. Somehow I got him into the car and drove him here. By the time we arrived, he was like this. Mona. She undid the first few buttons of Xavier's shirt, listened to his labored breathing while heroically ignoring the urge to follow the little tuft of golden chest hair that peeked out from the top of his undershirt. Mona. Drat the girl and her knack of falling into trouble. What did he have to eat? Oh well, let's see. She grinned and twirled a lock of her hair around her finger. I had a lovely roast chicken with creamy polenta and mushrooms, and I'm about 10 seconds away from losing my temper. Sophia gripped the girl by her shoulders and shook her gently. What did Xavier eat? Geez, calm down. Mona crawled to the other side of him and looked at her with a wounded expression. Xavier had a nice fat pork chop stuffed with spinach and some sort of pricey meat from Italy. I can't remember the name, but it looked good. She bit her lip, then examined her fingernails. Oh, and roasted beets, I think. Whatever it was, he really enjoyed it. Rolling her eyes, Sophia counted to 10 at least 4 times. None of the food sounded too exotic or even dangerous. Xavier, can you hear me? She tapped his cheeks a few times until his eyes fluttered open. Are you allergic to anything? His chest rose and fell, but he didn't speak. Xavier. Panic clogged her throat. Talk to me. I don't know how to treat you if you don't. Tell me what's wrong. Spinach. Sweat formed on his upper lip as he sucked in air. Hurry. He scrabbled for the breast pocket of his suit jacket shortly before he began to shake. He's allergic to spinach. What do we do? She swatted Xavier's hand aside and rooted in the pocket. What the hell was he searching for? She exclaimed when her fingers closed around object that felt like a pen. When she withdrew it, the bright white and yellow epinephrine pen for anaphylactic shock was obvious. Of course. How do we use it? How should I know? I'm usually the one getting myself into emergencies, not out of them. Mona's eyes were big as she stared down at the fallen werewolf. Why don't you just stick him? It says the medicine needs to be administered through the thigh. I'm not taking his pants off in order to do this. Not that undressing the hunky Paranormal wasn't exciting, but somehow she thought getting into a man's pants, especially her mate's pants, would be a bit more difficult. And a bit more private. Don't look at me. I'm not the one he keeps locking lips with. She clammed up. When Sophia glared. Funny. He's mine. Satisfied at Mona's jealousy, she bit her lip and glanced at Xavier's face. White as a sheet, his eyes had rolled back in his head, his breathing grew shallower as she dithered. Here goes nothing. Twisting off the cap, Sophia held the pen and frowned at the tip of the barely visible needle. Are you sure this is right? I have no idea, but you better hurry. He's getting worse. Mona lifted Xavier's head into her lap and stroked his hair. You can't let him die, Sophia. That would ruin all of his plans. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. Please. I don't see how he could still have plans if he was dead, but I'll try. Her heart raced. She wrapped her hand around the pen and jammed it into his thigh closest to her, hoping he forgave her for putting a hole in his slacks. She cringed when a sharp click sounded a few seconds later. Does that mean it's finished? Beats me. As Mona continued to stroke Xavier's curls, Sophia gritted her teeth, gripping the pen a bit tighter than the situation warranted. It wasn't fair. Mona got to fiddle with those golden locks while she, Sophia, had to stab him in the leg. A little less petting, Mona. Those curls belong to me just like the rest of him, so back off. She sucked in a surprised breath at the vehemence in her voice. A glance at her roommate showed her shock as well. Mona dropped her hands to the carpet. I'm sorry, Sophia, I didn't mean to. Never mind. She bit back a smile. Where had her sudden possessiveness come from? What's supposed to happen now? Throwing what she hoped was a spent pen in the general direction of the coffee table, she leaned over Xavier and listened to his breathing. Faint but no longer labored. Xavier? How are you feeling? When a tiny smile lifted the corner of his mouth, butterflies erupted in her stomach. As she stared into his beautiful amber eyes, she thought she'd never seen such a beautiful sight. Better. He glanced up at her. Thank you. He grasped her hand and squeezed. I owe you one. Her cheeks warmed from his words. I'll bear that in mind. Remind me never to let Mona talk me into anything that remotely resembles dinner. He joked weakly as he struggled into a sitting position. And, besides, I thought she was afraid of me. She may now be more afraid of me. Relief washed through Sophia's body at his attempt at humor. Just sit here and rest for a moment. There's no rush. We have an appointment to keep. He had an allergy attack and still managed to remember a crucial point in the quest. We'll go when you're ready. It's wrong you're making me do this, Sophia grumbled as she and Xavier stood outside the Werewolves' library 2 hours later. Why do I have to talk to her? I can't even stand her. The abbreviated answer? Because Hannah refuses to tell me anything regarding Renn's whereabouts due to some shady business we were involved in 3 months ago. Hannah claims I flirted with the mermaid, but I don't recall the incident. I simply tried to move the girl out of danger. Xavier leaned a shoulder against the wall and grinned. Besides, it'll be interesting to see if the two of you can have a civil conversation. It's obvious you ladies have the same intentions regarding my future, yet neither of you wants to give up control. He rolled his eyes to the ceiling. I love being the center of attention. Jerk. I warned you to limit your relationship with Hannah, for truly made it pair like you claim. Why don't you honor my wishes? Xavier reeled back as if she'd slapped him. I told you. There's nothing between Hannah and myself. He emitted a low growl. You must take my word for it. No, she swung around to face him. A deep scowl etched over her face. I'm sick of having to accept things without a valid explanation. Sophia jabbed a finger into his chest. I promised I'd stick with you regardless of what's between us, but I asked the same respect from you. Her eyes flashed blue fire that he felt to the depths of his soul. I want to hear it right now. She crossed her arms over her chest, clearly waiting for his answer. I'm your mate and therefore your master. You will do as I tell you. He advanced on her, driving her before him until her backside connected with the wall. There are no other choices. That's how wolves operate. He smelled her Fear, but it also mixed with exhilaration and power. She must be made to understand his position. In case it's escaped your notice, you're doing everything you can to not be a wolf, which will make you fully human. And in human relationships, power is balanced between the pair. She narrowed her eyes. I'll ask you again. Send Hannah home. Anger welled in his throat and made its presence known as a snarl. You're mine, Sophia. What I say is law. He placed his hands on either side of her head. Hannah isn't a threat to you. She's welcome in my home as long as she wants to be here. He dared her to defy him. We have a mission to finish. Suggest we concentrate on that. Xavier pressed closer until her body molded to his, and still she refused to drop her gaze. He'd never met a woman like her. She matched him in every way. That thought excited him like nothing else could. Shall we go in? His lips were a hair's breadth from her, but he refrained from claiming them. After you, werewolf. She shoved his shoulders until he released her. You'd do well to remember who I am as well, and sooner or later paranormal beings fall under my control. I can make you or break you, Xavier, so don't threaten me again. She preceded him into the library. He followed every subtle sway and movement of her hips and allowed a small, grudging smile. He would take great pleasure in mating with her, not to bend her to his will, but to draw out her fire and blend it with his own. His woman for all eternity, no matter what. Heaven help him. Xavier entered the library with a smug smile, but when Hannah rushed over to him and pressed a kiss to his cheek, Sophia's good humor vanished. She turned in his direction. Edwin intercepted her before she could do much more than clench her hands into fists. Bastard. Obviously she meant nothing to Xavier except another conquest. All his words about them being life mates were lies. A sharp stab of pain pierced her heart. How stupid of her to think otherwise. Let me pass. Could I request a moment of your time, Miss Rains? I believe it would be mutually beneficial endeavor. Glancing at the hand wrapped around the upper portion of her arm, she didn't have much choice but to comply. Of course. Is there a problem? Wrinkles gathered at the corners of his eyes. A tiny smile lifted his lips, lending him an air of exhausted happiness. The babies aren't in trouble, are they? As far as I know, the small ones are both fine. Moving to the opposite side of the room, he plunged his hands deep into his trouser pockets. I need your help. She glanced at Xavier, pleased to see he watched her. She wanted to make him jealous, make him feel what she did whenever he was with Hannah. How best to accomplish this? Spend quality time with his biggest rival, of course, yet the dread that had been her constant companion since she met Xavier gripped her stomach. What's on your mind? You're werewolf. Edwin jetted his chin in the direction she looked. I have watched them for a couple of months. Now I am concerned. He rubbed his fingers over a stubble-covered cheek as he held her gaze. Is it me, or are the two of them too? Sophia took pity on him and finished his search for words. Chummy. Yes, I suppose that could be one way to describe their relationship. I completely understand where you're coming from. As much as I'd like to believe it when Xavier says they're just friends, I somehow doubt it. She drifted over to a bookshelf and ran a fingertip along the spines of the books. It's annoying, to say the least. A faint trace of sarcasm coated Edwin's laugh, making her smile. You agree, don't you? Xavier's fingers curled into fists at his side, then relaxed in a never-ending circuit. Sophia narrowed her eyes. This would end tonight, even if she had to drag Hannah to the portal herself. Yes, very annoying. When my wife met him, he had a rather immediate and strong reaction toward her. He and I even came to fisticuffs about it. He glanced at the two of them, then back to Sophia. Xavier finally took the hint. But then, in exchange for his promise to help us defeat a demon lord, Hannah told him she would find him a girlfriend. I see. So, Hannah had a physic vision and told Xavier about me. He came running. That's why he's been staking out my apartment. When she next peeked at the werewolf, surprise skittered through her when he caught her gaze. Deliberately, she moved closer to Edwin, even dared to lay a hand on his arm, then smiled at Xavier in challenge. She lifted an eyebrow when he stiffened. His low growl floated in the air across the room. Let him get angry. I am not saying you are Xavier's mate, but Hannah is usually correct with her visions. Only you can decide your ultimate future. What I am asking you to do is keep Xavier occupied away from my wife so she will grow bored and focus her attention elsewhere. And preferably back to you. Sophia gave him an appreciative glance. He was a sexy man in a cliché tall and dark sort of way. Why don't you tell Hannah? You're not pleased with her behavior and you feel neglected? I mean, you've only been married a few months. That's hardly enough time to get to know each other. Once those kids are born there'll be even less. A black eyebrow lifted accompanied by a dimple in his left cheek. Hannah is a very strong-willed creature. She snorted and poked Edwin in the chest with a fingertip, taken off guard by the wall of muscle beneath the silk shirt. What sort of former vampire are you if you don't order her around from time to time? Do you want those kids to see their father as a passive-aggressive man? Sophia risked a glance at Xavier. A shiver skittered down her spine from his glare. Listen, I'm not going to pussyfoot around the issue. Xavier interests me, and while I'm not all the way convinced he and I are fully compatible, it's nice to know he's there. My biggest obstacle now is your wife. You need to man up and remove her. Before I do. Point taken. Edwin's lips twitched with the beginnings of a smile. I will admit I was an arrogant man when I first met her. Since then we have treated each other as equals. Really, and do you feel like her equal when she spends so much time with Xavier, your former rival? She nodded toward the werewolf, pleased to see his attention was fully on her now. How do you feel when she rushes across the room to greet him with a kiss on the cheek and whispered confidences? Although she spoke to Edwin, Sophia kept her gaze on Xavier. His rage radiated across the room to her. Serves him right. Women don't want polite and passive men all the time. With a start she realized she firmly believed what she spoke. She wanted to see Xavier in the throes of jealousy. She wanted his confirmation that she was his only one. And above all, she wanted the werewolf to boot her rival. Edwin nodded. You are correct in your assessment. My wife has meddled in your affairs enough. I am sorry for the inconvenience. His lips formed a thin line, as he too stared in Xavier's direction. I will rectify this situation immediately. Thank you. She grinned at the cold anger clouding Xavier's face and just for the hell of it, she stood on tiptoe and kissed the former vampire's cheek. If that didn't bring the werewolf running, nothing would. I believe you will find Renn at the Lake Windsor golf course. She is the activities director and can direct you further. Can I ask you a question? Guilt crept up her spine with the determination of a drill sergeant. Do you think Xavier is happy with his life as it stands now? How do you mean? Sophia sighed, then chewed on her bottom lip for a moment. Do you truly believe being a werewolf doesn't bother him? In her own life she knew being commanded by events not of her own making drove her nuts. If he doesn't lift the curse, will he be okay with his life? I do not believe the affliction is the source of his discontent. Edwin held up a hand when Sophia would have asked another question. I cannot direct your path, but I do know this. A higher being did not bring you two together just for their own amusement. There is a purpose behind every action in the universe, and it is our job to figure out what that is. His face softened with a smile. Stay true to yourself, and you will never have cause to doubt. Now, if you will excuse me, I believe I am going home with my wife. That is the first logical statement I've heard in the last 48 hours. Interest flooded his face and set his dark eyes dancing. Ah, you are a student of Spock from the Starship Enterprise? I find his approach to life to be quite sound. Sure. He's great. Somehow, Sophia's faith in the paranormal world plummeted if the former vamp was a Trekkie. Good luck. Xavier kept his gaze solely on Edwin and Sophia. Throughout their whole conversation, she'd blatantly teased him, provoked his ire until his skin prickled with the need to shift and show her exactly why he was in charge. He would drag her off to his bedroom if need be and spend the rest of the weekend convincing her they were meant for each other. Lifting the curse be damned. Hannah tugged on his arm. You aren't paying attention to me. Is something wrong? Yes, everything. He growled louder than he meant. Hannah flinched. Edwin. And Sophia looked his way. She's mine. He bounded across the carpet, yanked Sophia away from the former vampire. What the hell do you think you're playing at? Leighton, that is no way to treat your female. Edwin took a step toward him, but stood rooted to the floor when Xavier emitted another growl, this one far more menacing. Back off, Edwin. This is between Sophia and me. Nausea swept through him as the shift threatened. You can stay here or you can go, but either way things change after tonight. Sophia snorted as she pulled away. Oh, now your dander is up? Maybe you finally get what I've been feeling every time I see you with Hannah. Why the hell has it taken you this long to decide which of us you want? You've been waiting for me to become angry? He gaped. His canine teeth had lengthened and his nose twitched. Sophia showed no fear, and there was no discernible smell of it from her. Xavier inhaled sharply, but she was aroused. You provoked me. I tested you. Sophia stared back, not dropping her gaze, no trace of cowardice in her tense stance. It's up to you how you act next. Waves of acute desire flooded through him at her open invitation. Finally, after 2 days of trying to convince the woman they were mates, she took up the challenge and ran with it. He wasn't sure he'd be able to keep up, but he welcomed the chase. First, his friends needed to leave. Edwin, Hannah, as much as I've enjoyed your visit, I'm afraid I must ask you to go. Edwin cleared his throat and grasped Hannah's hand. Come, woman, we are returning home. You have meddled quite enough in Xavier's life. Let him take care of himself for once. He might surprise you at his level of proficiency. But I'm not done talking. We must make plans for Hannah's words cut off when Xavier growled for a third time, deep and low. Fine, but I'm not happy. At least I will be. Sophia's mouth turned down in a frown. I wish you safe travels and an easy delivery of your children. Xavier and I will send a gift when they're born. Xavier curled his hands into fists at Sophia's dictation of his life. She was as bad as Hannah. We'll visit before then, I'm sure, once we have worked out the current snags in our relationship. He sent a warning glance to the object of his obsession. She merely ignored him. She drove him to the brink with apparent relish, and all he could think about was retribution. That matter is still up for debate. Sophia laid a hand on his forearm. He flexed his muscle in a show of strength. Her accelerated heartbeat was the only indication she noticed. Take care. Sophia and I will discuss it and then let you know. His lips curled when Edwin met his gaze. Goodbye, Edwin, and good luck. Xavier clasped his friend on the shoulder. Aware, Sophia watched his every move. I'll send your luggage through the portal later. Much appreciated. Good luck to you as well. It looks as if you'll need it sooner than you think. You are a stronger man than I to take on a gatekeeper. Edwin propelled his protesting spouse out the door, pulling it firmly closed behind him. Slowly Xavier turned, his gaze fixed on Sophia's face. She showed no remorse for her hand in the proceedings, no guilt, only satisfaction, and he meant to knock her down a peg. I don't appreciate your high-handed attempt to manipulate my life. Oh, but it was okay for that pushy redhead to boss you? He circled her. This doesn't concern Hannah or Edwin any longer, but has everything to do with you and me. Xavier made another pass, this time closer to her. I'm your mate, Sophia. No one else matters. And how do I know you'll stay true to those words? What happens if you meet some other woman on this quest and decide she's the one you want? Her eyes were as hard as ice. My life is screwed up enough. If I give in to you and then you betray me, where does that leave my future? I pledge to you now. From this moment forward, the only woman who matters is you. I expect you to give me the same courtesy regarding other men. Another pass, and this time his arm touched hers. His canine teeth receded, yet his anger still simmered. And if I refuse because I don't trust you? Then we'll have this conversation again. Perhaps you require further encouragement. Moving swiftly on silent feet, Xavier crushed her in his arms, slanting his mouth on hers, and plied her lips without gentleness. When she matched him kiss for kiss, his blood rushed loudly in his ears to match the pulse in his groin. He stroked her tongue, worked his fingers underneath her sweater until he cupped her breasts, palming them. Do you deny the attraction between us? He dragged his mouth from hers to nip a line of kisses down the side of her neck. I don't deny it, but I still don't trust you. She raked her fingers through his hair, then tucked his mouth to hers. My fidelity isn't in question any longer. He growled, lifted her in his arms, and carried her to the desk in the corner of the room, finally setting her on the edge If I catch you looking or even talking to another man, I'll kill him and come after you. With one sweep of his arm, Xavier sent the contents of the desktop crashing to the floor. Do you understand? Then you'd better be as good as you advertise, Werewolf. She grabbed a handful of his shirt and reeled him in. Otherwise, I'll be annoyed and disappointed. She nibbled a spot just under his jaw that made his knees buckle. Xavier claimed her lips, moved his mouth over hers as he thumbed her tight nipples. When she moaned and stirred, he laid her back against the desktop. How much do you desire me, Sophia? Tell me what you want. He slipped his fingers over the warm skin of her stomach to fumble at the button on her pants. She was his woman and she knew it. He felt her tremors deep in her body long before they broke over her skin. Only you. Her words were little more than pleas as her eyes drifted close. The dark fringe of her lashes against her pale cheeks held him captive. With one last searing kiss, Xavier moved away. His chest heaved, his pulse thundered, but he grinned at the provocative picture she made. That's too bad. Because I cannot, in good conscience, make love to you if you don't fully trust me. He playfully smacked her thigh. Now put yourself together. I'm sure the mermaid is expecting us. He was in such a good mood it didn't even upset him when the shoe she threw at him smacked him square in the back. Power was everything in a relationship and he retained control. Chapter 9. Finally, after hours spent dealing with the extraneous people in both Sophia's and his life, they were alone and working to lift the curse. Xavier breathed deep, filled his lungs with the crisp, clean autumn air, and grinned so wide his jaws protested. I think perhaps I'll allow you to search out Renn while I go to the driving range, he stated in a conversational tone as they mounted the concrete steps at the front of the Windsor Lakes Country Club and Golf Course. I've had a bit of a stressful week and could do with something to relax me. I don't think so, Wolfie. It's already midday on October 27th and I don't have to remind you time is ticking. If anyone is stressed out it'd be me. Since I have to deal with you. The look she threw him could double as a death ray. Especially after the dirty trick you played on me yesterday. You brought it on yourself. Besides, you're supposed to love me despite my flaws. He raced her to the glass door, holding it open so she could pass through before him. His only reward was a glare. Ladies first. Who said anything about love? I think your primary focus would be to lift the curse. Love is the natural next step after one finds their mate. He leaned close, enough to smell her floral and vanilla scent. I have a few ideas that will help the feeling along if you need suggestions. Her stony silence smacked him with enough force to make him double over in mock pain, but she almost cracked a smile. He put his hand on the small of her back and ushered her into the golf-oriented pro shop. You can keep your suggestions. Sophia drew a finger along the length of a shiny putter. Nothing like that will ever happen between you and me, not while Sterling is still alive and well. She snorted her annoyance when he propelled her to the counter. So you say now, but I haven't turned the full effect of my charm on you and it'll be much more than what you got a taste of yesterday. He winked pleased when a blush tinged her cheeks. You need humor in your life, Sophia. There's no use fretting over Sterling if you don't have to. A cringe twisted her face. She looked over her shoulder as if expecting to see the man lurking about. Where Sterling is concerned, there's always cause for worry. Once the curse lifted, Xavier promised himself he'd whisk Sophia away to some remote vacation spot, make her forget the horrors of working for the portal master. Poor Sophia, always trying to save the world. He grinned at the boy behind the counter whose name tag read Travis. Excuse me, young man, we're looking for an employee by the name of Renn. Dude, she's out by the lake at this time of day. Don't expect to catch her. Every time someone goes down there she just vanishes. He buried his nose in his comic book and ignored them. Really? Does she disappear into the air in a cloud of purple smoke, or perhaps breaks into 2 million pieces and blows away in the wind? Xavier purposefully bared his teeth and emitted a low growl. I'm afraid I need a bit more information. Maybe I'll circle around after we finish with Renn and eat. The boy, Sophia's hand on his arm, dislodged the thought and tempered the urge. Allow me. She smiled at the acne-prone teen and used her index finger to lower the pages of the comic book until their eyes met. Could you point us in the direction of the lake? She winked, then slowly pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose. I'd appreciate your help. She leaned on the counter. Xavier's eyes nearly bugged out of his head at the amount of creamy cleavage the low-cut neckline of her shirt revealed. The woman had an alter ego after all. He looked at her with new respect and, more than a little desire. The boy wasn't unaffected either. As Travis swallowed, his Adam's apple quivered. I'll do better than that. I'll drive you down myself in the golf cart. It's the biggest lake on the property, and there's even a picnic area on a small island in middle of it. Another teenage boy came behind the counter. From a back room, Travis spoke in low tones with him, then led Xavier and Sophia out a rear door to a waiting golf cart. Hop in. We'll be there in a couple minutes. Oh yeah, if your name is Sophia, Renn is expecting you. She said to tell you to follow the instructions and you'd know what they mean. What's he talking about? Xavier prodded her with a forefinger. I have no idea. She shrugged. I'm not an all-seeing oracle, so how should I know what her instructions mean? Xavier took a spot on the back seat behind the young man and draped a long arm along the seat. Will you be joining us, Sophia? Or do you want to walk over? He popped on a pair of dark sunglasses. I'd hate to think of you out there dodging maniacal golf cart drivers. I'm coming. No need to get your feathers ruffled. As soon as she stepped into the cart, Travis stomped on the gas pedal, throwing her against his chest. Travis. Sorry, ma'am. I'm late for lunch. My girlfriend gets mad if I'm late. Get used to it, buddy. Women are always mad about something, and it's even worse if you are mates. Xavier briefly clasped Sophia close, dropping his voice to a whisper. The last time I checked, werewolves didn't have feathers. His chest tightened when she wiggled away and planted her rear end on the seat. He put his lips against her ear. If you'd like me to be ruffled, though, I can oblige, especially after that momentary bit of flirtation with poor Travis. He nipped her earlobe, teased the fleshy bit with his tongue. That side of you makes me hot. Get your head out of the gutter. The thing with Travis was a necessary evil. She scooted across the seat to the opposite side of the golf cart. We have a job to do. If I were you, I wouldn't get too fond of me. In 4 days we'll go our separate ways. No, we won't. When this is over, the first stop on our path is my bed. After that, who knows, but we'll go there together, as mates. You know this. Stop denying it. Hell, I think you say these things simply to annoy me. The golf cart ricocheted to a halt near one of the larger water hazards on the course, nearly spilling them out of the vehicle. Thanks for the lift. Sure. Good luck with Renn. Alone at last. Xavier swept her into his arms as Travis motored over the winding path. The sharp scent of gasoline lingered on the air after him. Nice location for a romantic interlude. A laugh escaped at her panicked expression. No? You'd prefer somewhere more private. He heaved a mock sigh. I guess we'll search for the mermaid. He released her and stepped onto the deck that jutted out over the water. Leaning against the wooden railing, he peered into the greenish water that sparkled in the sun and shaded his eyes against the glare. In the middle of the synthetic lake lay a white gazebo on a tiny island. How do you suppose a person reaches the island? I don't see. Bridge. Sophia joined him at the rail. How do we find Renn? A splash below caught his attention, then a brilliant flash of color streaked through the water. Did you see that? At a loss, Xavier tucked his sunglasses in a suit pocket. A scrap of paper fluttering in the slight breeze became his salvation. Look. He yanked the noted from a wooden signboard. The activity director is unavailable at the moment due to circumstances beyond her control. What does that mean? A wrinkle appeared between Sophia's eyebrows. So now, she won't see us? Not necessarily. He moved farther down the deck until he came to another signpost. He frowned when she rubbed the spot on her wrist that contained her birthmark. It hurts you again? Yes. Danger's probably imminent, which is nothing new. What's that? Not sure, but we may need to ingest this science project. A small collection of glass vials waited in a wooden cabinet, each bearing a label with the words, "Drink this," in heavy calligraphy. Ladies first. His lips twitched when she gave him an ineffectual shove. He supposed it was a good sign that she always had to be touching him in some way. Her acceptance of their fate was a slow journey, but eventually they would arrive. Is this your idea of a joke? Didn't you ever read Alice in Wonderland? No. Good can come from drinking strange stuff. Yes, I've read the book. I found it a charming story. Why do you assume I'm behind every abnormal occurrence you encounter? He unrolled a small scroll and met her stormy blue eyes over the top of the crinkled paper, while struggling to retain a grip on his sanity. She'd break him with those eyes. Alone if he wasn't careful, and he didn't want to be careful any longer. He wanted to drag her into the trees and make love to her, claim her, brand her as his, but the lure of lifting the curse hung heavy on him. He owed it to them both to see it through to the end. Since I've met you, it seems to be par for the course, no pun intended. She smiled at a passing golfer on the cart path. A pang of jealousy stabbed through Xavier's chest and a growl escaped. He wished for once she'd smile because of something he said or did. Be honest. Sophia, this humdrum life you claim to have lived before you met me contained no bizarre occurrences. When she remained silent, he knew he'd won the battle. He handed her a vial containing a blue liquid. Drink this. I'm aware of what it says. She popped off the cork. The air around them filled with the sharp scent of peppermint. Do you need to be so damn frustrating? He sighed in defeat, raking a hand over his face. The scroll says if we are urgently seeking an audience with Renn, will need to swim to her living quarters at the bottom of the lake. Oh. And the footnote says she's expecting both of us for tea. He popped the cork on his own bottle and clinked it against Sophia's. Cheers. Wait. She grabbed his arm before the vial reached his lips. You can't drink something because the label tells you to. We'll be fine. I won't let harm befall you. He winked, debated briefly the ramifications of teasing her further. Thank you for your concern. I'm growing on you. Baby steps in the right direction for his stubborn woman. There are consequences. What if it's poisonous? He ignored her protests and downed the vial's contents, which tasted of peppermint schnapps. Xavier cringed, stuck his tongue out as if the air would take away the bitterness. He wouldn't admit it to her, but his stomach churned, not from a reaction from the blue liquid but from apprehension. When the anticipated spasms of agony never came, he threw back his head and laughed. Worrywart. Fine. Don't blame me if you have another allergy attack. You haven't refilled your prescription. She swallowed her own blue liquid. Nasty. See, no harm done. Xavier grinned. You're quite a skeptic considering what you do for a living. What does that mean? Her mouth opened and closed much like a fish. She laid palm over her stomach. Xavier. Damn. I was wrong. It seems, whether you want to believe it or not, we're about to become like the fish. A slash of pain sliced through his body to culminate in his neck. Bloody hell, that hurts worse than changing into a wolf. He clutched his neck. Gashes appeared beneath his fingertips. Gills. He gasped as the slits opened and closed. Xavier, you're turning into a fish. Wonder filled Sophia's voice. Her mouth formed an O of surprise. Geez, look at that. Nausea washed over him when his legs fused together. The act of contorting ripped the suit from his body. It fell in shreds around him. He tumbled to the deck, the owner of a brand new tail covered with turquoise scales that caught the sunlight. Waves of pain radiated to every nerve ending. Xavier gasped for air. I can't breathe, Sophia. I'll wait for you below. His words were quick, as he hauled his body across the decking and flopped into the water. Wait. Sophia fell to the deck when her legs also transformed into a fish. Tail complete with shimmering purple scales and a gauzy lavender fin at the end. This is not acceptable. She did not want to be a mermaid any more than she wanted to be a gargoyle. Oh God. She flopped around on the wood. As her tail thrashed about, her jeans and loafers fell away. The ripped bits of frayed fabric scattered about the deck must be the remnants. The tail issue pushed into the background as her lungs raged with fire. Sophia struggled to force oxygen into organs that no longer worked. With a cry, she clutched her neck as gills forced their way into her skin, the vents fluttering of their own accord. I can't breathe. She gasped, but nothing she did would bring the vital gas into her lungs. Stars danced before her eyes. Her vision flirted with blackness as she labored in agony. Sophia, you must come into the water. Xavier flung a glob of bracken onto the decking to secure her attention. I can't. She dragged herself to the railing and gazed into the rippling Water meeting Xavier's concerned gaze. A shiver racked her body and she looked away. In some annoyance she spied an abbreviated version of a tank top, of glittering iridescent sequins and beads which had replaced her conservative button-down shirt and blazer. Sophia! Exasperation tinged with panic rang loud in his voice. Woman, haul your ass down here now. No, I don't know how to swim. She gasped and choked, freaked out at the feeling of the flapping gills in her neck. Xavier, help me. You're a freaking mermaid, damn it, now jump. There was no other choice. Clutching her glasses in one hand and her purse in the other, Sophia closed her eyes and maneuvered her body off the deck. Shockingly cold water greeted her. She shivered as it closed around her. Sophia floundered in the murky liquid until Xavier snaked an arm around her waist, lifting her up, and sanity returned. I can't swim. Her teeth chattered and gooseflesh covered her arms. She attempted to clear the water from her eyes before popping her glasses in place. I never learned how. Didn't think it was necessary since Indiana is a virtually landlocked state. There's no need to worry, my dear, since we're now part of the aquatic community. He dipped beneath the waterline. Sophia panicked when something yanked her below. Her heart pounded as she clawed frantically toward the surface in an effort not to drown. As she sank, Xavier appeared beside her, grinning. His tail moved back and forth in gentle ebbs. With the gills she breathed normally. The water filtering through the breathing apparatus tickled her neck. This is different. All sounds from the busy golf course vanished in the underwater world. Vague echoes pulsed through the wetness, muted and distorted, as sunlight danced and bent all around her. This is very different. I agree. When I woke up this morning I didn't think I'd become a merman. Xavier joked. I'm not sure if it's better or worse than being a werewolf. She heard him as well as if they'd been chatting above the water. Xavier pushed through the shadowy blue-green haze with ease while Sophia struggled to come to grips with her new tail. I don't understand how to move. As strange as it felt to carry on a conversation underwater, it was twice as bizarre to lose the ability to function without legs. Relax and follow my lead. Okay. She told herself that having a panic attack underwater was not a desirable scenario, then fastened the strap of her purse across her chest, prayed her glasses would remain on her nose, and experimentally wriggled her tail. As the powerful appendage undulated up and down, her body listed and leaned. Instead of gliding gracefully forward, she spiraled in circles. I just don't understand. Xavier's chuckle bounced and echoed in the sparkling water. You're overthinking the issue. He demonstrated the mechanics of swimming with an elegant flip of his tail. Now try again. Swatting at a slow-moving base, she concentrated. It wasn't as much swimming in the traditional sense as it was flipping the tail and guiding her body in the direction she wanted to go. Occasionally, Sophia used her arms and hands, but they weren't necessary to propulsion. Soon she followed Xavier through the water as if she'd been doing it all her life. Bubbles tickled her nose. When she ran full tilt into a large school of bluegill, panic coated her stomach as the fish swirled and darted around her. A flip of her tail cleared the group. You make a presentable mermaid. Xavier's eyes twinkled as he and Sophia sliced through the sun-dappled water, dodging schools of pike and trout and skimming over aquatic plants. I especially like the lavender shade of your skin. She glanced at her arm, surprised to see her skin had become a faint mottled purple, but the crown-shaped birthmark still glowed red. You used the word presentable to describe me. Sophia slowed in order to study Xavier. His suit had vanished. In its place was nothing but the slightly tanned expanse of his chest, sprinkled with just a bit of blonde hair. A necklace of small shells hung around his neck, floating slightly with the current. Just as her insides turned to mush at the sight of all that manly skin, he spoke, destroying her Neptunish fantasy. My choice of words was intentional. If I described you as beautiful, not only is it a generic term for women, but it's also vastly untrue of you. Untrue. Her softer emotions fizzled in the face of the anger surging inside. You really shouldn't have stated the obvious. I have feelings, you know. Your supposed mate, shouldn't you think I'm the most beautiful woman you've ever seen? His words hurt, but she'd rather die than let him see how they affected her. Xavier swam in a circle around her. My earlier statement wasn't meant to be obvious. It was merely an observation. The outline of an old school bus loomed in the distance, the yellow paint seeming to glow as a beacon. So what exactly is it you've observed about me? She yanked off her now useless glasses and jammed them into her purse. Whatever the reason, her vision was clear under the water. I'm aware of my flaws. Indeed. He tickled the belly of a passing snapping turtle. As I told the marriage counselor, your best feature is your smile. You can bring me to my knees with it. Even that will pale in comparison to the ever-changing depths of your eyes. I lose myself in them every time I look at you. He tugged her to a stop and lifted her chin so she had no choice but to peer into his face. Confidence is the greatest aphrodisiac a woman owns, and when you use yours, nothing can stop you. Oh. Sophia blinked, then pulled away in confusion as butterflies played havoc with her stomach. Even in the underwater world, he had the power to reduce her to jelly with something as mundane as a glance or a few soft words. She licked her lips, tasted silt, and tried hard not to think about what else was in the water. It's a good thing I don't exude confidence, huh? Otherwise I'd have men falling at my feet, or tail as the case may be. She darted through the water, determined to put plenty of distance between her and Xavier before something drastic happened. What if he kissed her in the water? Would she still be able to breathe? His persistence could be a hindrance to the mission. It would be too dangerous to become involved with anyone, let alone Xavier. For a host of reasons, namely because Sterling wouldn't be pleased. Still, the promise of a lifetime with such a man shone bright as a beacon she desperately wanted to catch. Why must you persist in running away or changing the subject when the conversation becomes of a personal nature? His long, elegant hand closed around her wrist, preventing her from going further. The rusted school bus sat 10 feet away. She whirled to face him, but not before lacy curtains twitched in one of the windows. The less we know about each other, the more likely you'll remain intact. His shell necklace floating on the gentle current distracted her. She shook her head as her fingers itched to touch that glorious golden chest hair. Don't you understand? I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you because of me. Is it me you're trying to protect, or you? Are you so terrified of what Sterling will do you'd throw away a chance at happiness? He stroked her cheek. I'll never let him hurt you, sweetness, surely you can feel that. Do you call being a fish person happiness? She focused her gaze on Xavier's gills as they opened and closed in languid movement. She couldn't look into his eyes because she'd be lost. Now wasn't the time, so she retreated behind sarcasm. Perhaps I should turn myself into a statue and sink to the bottom of the lake. Maybe you can call that unadulterated joy. Yanking her arm from his grip, she bumped into a common map turtle on her way to the door of the bus. Or are you so full of yourself you think a kiss would send me over the top in elation? Knowing that statement wasn't far from the truth, Sophia banged on the door with a fist and glared at the werewolf. So we're mates. Big deal. It's better for both of us if you forget about me once we're done with this quest. Don't be so sure. I have 4 days to change your mind. Xavier grinned and stroked his goatee as they waited. Once I set my mind to something, I'll work at the task until it's finished. I'm very persistent. The matter is finished now, she muttered between clenched teeth. Xavier rested a hand on the small of her back as the door to the bus wrenched open, and Sophia stared down the muzzle of a harpoon gun. Chapter 10. I never thought I'd see you again, but I promised myself that if I did, I'd kill you. Green eyes glared over the weapon. I guess it's my lucky day. The mermaid's mossy hair floated about her head and shoulders. Red starfish stuck within the mass. The business end of the harpoon lance bobbed 6 inches from Sophia's nose. She cocked an eyebrow at Xavier. Annie Oakley must be talking to you. Seems so. Xavier shrugged and flashed his trademark charming smile. Renn, I admit when I dropped you unceremoniously on the lawn of that burning house, I didn't anticipate you would harbor a grudge against me for saving your life. Oh please, Xavier, the universe doesn't revolve around you. She gestured to Sophia with the weapon. I'm talking about your girlfriend here. I'm not his girlfriend. Sophia eased off the doorstep until she was slightly behind Xavier. Women's lib had its advantages, but being shot first was not one of them. She's my mate, actually. I don't care. Hannah called and warned me you were on your way. She jogged my memory to exactly who Sophia is. Oh goody. Hannah makes yet another intrusion in our lives, Sophia whispered. Into the werewolf's ear. Retribution for throwing her out? Renn lowered her weapon and stepped aside. Get inside. The least I can do is offer tea before I take my revenge. From her position behind him, she felt Xavier stiffen. The muscles of his naked back played under her fingers. Any violence enacted this day will be at my hand. Don't threaten, Sophia. As her heart lurched, they moved into the living area of Renn's home. Sometimes annoyingly superior men were useful to have around. You must be out of your mind to think we're going to take anything from you. The seats had been removed from the bus, and in their place the vehicle was divided into a mobile home-like setting. Standing or floating as the act actually was in the living area, Sophia looked directly into the tiny dining area with equally abbreviated appliances. The concept of how electric kitchen machines worked underwater escaped her. But she didn't question the issue. She'd learned long ago the truth wasn't disguised with simple explanations. Beyond the kitchen were a small bedroom and a bathroom. Sophia gnawed a thumbnail. How did mermaids use the facilities? Sophia. Reality came rushing back as if she'd been slapped. Her cheeks flamed while Renn and Xavier stared. I can't trust her. Big surprise there. As Renn shrugged, her tangled mass of hair floated away from her body to reveal two perfectly formed breasts. She opened her mouth to object, but Xavier interrupted. What Sophia means is, since she is a vegetarian, she's concerned about what you'll offer in the way of a repast. He dropped onto a chintz-covered sofa. If I'd meant to say that I would have. Sophia glared at him. Even as a merman, he managed to loll about with elegance and understated masculinity. At least he'd averted his eyes from Renn's chest, which went a long way in endearing him to her. Don't put words in my mouth, Xavier, it's a bad habit. She planted her hands on her hips. We can't trust her. What are you going to do when she attempts to murder me? First, I won't let harm come to you. I'll die protecting you. Second, if your death occurs, I'll kill her in revenge. Drop the subject. Xavier inserted a warning in the silky soft words. Why don't you hear her out? After that, you have my permission to get your hackles up. He chuckled at his own joke. This is humorous since I am the werewolf in the group. Funny. Sophia met Renn's gaze. They rolled their eyes, and for one brief moment the women were on the same page. The moment was broken when the mermaid dumped her harpoon gun on the coffee table with a muffled clatter. So what made you decide to take up residence in an old-school bus? She glanced around the length of the bus and shuddered at the decorators. Nightmare of a chintz explosion, complete with white ruffled eyelet curtains at each window. It's quite, something. Floral patterns in all shapes, sizes, and colors adorned every available fabric surface, blurring slightly in the gentle current. It's amazing what you can get on eBay. Renn busied herself with a teapot and poured out 3 cups, then distributed them. What? You thought mermaids just floated through bodies of water, eternally playing with the fish, perhaps flipping around in circles while singing stupid children's songs? She paused. You've got a lot to learn about the world, Sophia. Naivete can be deadly. You bought the bus online? How did you get it delivered? That one fact wouldn't leave her alone. Of course not. I found the bus at the bottom of the lake the last time I happened to shift. She shrugged as if the details bored her. I come here when I'm in mermaid form. No one bothers me in the water. She glared. Until you two showed up. Sorry. Given the chance, I would have steered clear, trust me. Besides, it's Hannah's fault. If I had the choice, I'm sure I could have found a mermaid elsewhere. She experimentally swished her hand through the water in front of her and frowned. What are you doing? Explain to me why hair and fabric moves in the lake current but other objects remain stationary. Sophia clicked her tongue against the back of her teeth. Shouldn't everything float? She picked up a teaspoon, then dropped it, frowning when it clattered to the floor just beyond her tail fin. I don't understand. A growl from Xavier signaled his annoyance. Is this pertinent to our cause? Yes. If something doesn't make sense to me, I want to know why. Perhaps we could determine the exact reasoning at a later time? He lightly tapped his teaspoon against the side of his cup, then laid it carefully on the saucer, his eyes hooded. Why is it that when I want questions answered they have to wait, but when you have a need it's suddenly the most important issue on the planet? She swatted a curious trout away and glared at the werewolf. Because I'm the dominant one in this relationship. His voice was soft and faintly teasing. I keep trying to tell you this. You're a chauvinist. A strangled sound issued from Renn's throat. She threw a cucumber sandwich across the room where it was pounced on by a hovering school of eager bluegill. Would you two stop bickering? Green eyes flashed and she glanced with longing at her harpoon gun. It all has to do with the electromagnetic properties already in the Earth, the chemical properties of the object in question, and the tilt of the Earth itself. I don't have time to teach science to you. Whatever. Sophia wasn't satisfied with the explanation, but then again she dealt heavily in the magical world. Maybe that didn't require in-depth reasoning. She slouched against the chair, squeaking in surprise when she disturbed a box turtle. Xavier turned a laugh into a cough as he regarded Renn. Explain why you wish to kill my mate. Yes, perhaps you could jog my memory regarding how you and I know each other. Sophia shot him a warning glance, but the werewolf merely grinned. You can't recall that all-important detail? As she angrily tossed her head. Her green hair fell over her chest. I know it was the single biggest event in my life to date. Xavier leaned forward and placed his teacup on the table. Perhaps you should tell us the story. Sophia meets quite a number of people her line of work. It happened shortly after I had been freed from Andre's Museum of Horrors. Met Sophia at a bus stop on my way to a job interview. We struck up a conversation and I might have told her I had some paranormal powers. The next thing I knew, she dragged me home on the pretense of offering me coffee. Oh no. Sophia narrowed her eyes and studied Renn's face. Yes, she did seem vaguely familiar, but she couldn't identify why. You couldn't possibly be the same person. Her birthmark burned. Surely not. Couldn't I? Renn turned to Xavier, a hand on his thigh. You're a shape shifter, so you know what I'm talking about. When we're in human form, we appear much different from our alternative persona. The only way our paranormal properties could be revealed is if we told another person or we happened to shift. True, but you chose to share your abilities with Sophia. You cannot fault her. The corners of his mouth lifted in a small grin as he removed the mermaid's hand. Sophia lost a piece of her heart to him in that moment. No, it was my own fault. I blabbed my secret. Once inside Sophia's apartment, I had no sooner started to cover up my story when she shoved me through the portal and turned me over to Sterling. Oh sure. When you tell the story like that, it makes me sound heartless. Sophia met Xavier's shocked gaze and shook her head. She's got it wrong. A sly grin stole across Renn's face, stretching the skin over already high cheekbones. I don't think so. You didn't allow me to explain my situation or plead my case. You were ruthless. She turned the full effect of her smile on Xavier, flipping her heavy hair over a shoulder. That wasn't the worst of the experience. The portal master detained me in a windowless room until I could transform for him. I can't just bring on the hiccups randomly. Of course not. Hiccups. Sophia glanced at the werewolf. He shrugged. Don't you understand? It's my job. I have no choice, and it seems to me your life didn't turn out that badly. Sterling reassigned me as the activities director at this country club. She left the sofa to swim about the close confines of the bus. Her tail swished in small aggravated strokes. Do you think I enjoy this sort of thing? My mind and intelligence are being wasted by these menial tasks. She drifted to a stop near Xavier, her eyes stormy and flashing. My future could have been so much more until you put an end to it all. If you want to be angry over your current circumstances, then please direct it at Sterling. Sophia stared at Renn and resisted the urge to giggle at the unaccustomed feeling of the gills in her neck. I was only doing my job. I concede you may have a point. Renn drifted to a sitting position next to Xavier once more, a thoughtful expression on her face. Thanks. Sophia glanced at Xavier, startled to find his intense gaze on her. Watching, waiting. Her stomach flipped as excitement rushed in to replace her annoyance. Let me be honest with you, Renn. As much as you hate your job, I hate mine 20 times more. I report directly to the portal master and carry out the jobs he's too cowardly to execute. I'm the face of the company that people see and despise. Mostly despise. Renn raked her fingers through her long hair. I apologize. My outburst was misplaced. The corners of Xavier's mouth twitched. Now that you girls have come to a Tentative peace. Perhaps we should get down to business. Sophia smiled, then said to Renn. He really is the most insufferable man, and will stop at nothing until he's proven right. For the first time since they arrived, the mermaid wore a genuine smile. He has always been so. The last time I saw him he swaggered through a crowded reception hall in a white tuxedo, mingling with the wealthy middle class. She allowed her grin to encompass the werewolf. He likes fine and unusual things in life. Xavier shrugged, the gesture as elegant under the water as it was on land. I refuse to apologize for my taste in material trappings. Unusual must be the order of the day, otherwise we wouldn't have come in search of you. She toyed with her teacup before finally letting it rest back on the coffee table. Would she always be doomed to meet Xavier's friends only to find out she'd betrayed them to Sterling? Would he resent that fact after a while? What do you require of me, Xavier? A wish granted. A night of carnal pleasure. She arched a green eyebrow and draped herself over his chest like a living blanket. Aren't you the least bit curious as to how mermaids engage in sexual activity? Get your hands off my werewolf. The anger behind the words surprised Sophia. While she admitted she harbored a certain curiosity about mere people reproduction methods, she wasn't about to inquire. She had a feeling it would be more ick than ooh la la. If anyone gets a night of pleasure with a wannabe Adonis, it's me. Xavier's eyes glowed deep amber. He shifted the wanton bundle of flesh and fin from his lap. I'll pass on the offer. My mate is the only woman I need. Heat spread through Sophia's body at the searing glance Xavier sent her. We need to gather a few things in order for Xavier to have a chance at lifting his curse. One of those items is a scale from a mermaid's tail. How about plucking off one of yours and we'll be on our way? And you think I'll just forgive and forget what you did to me to grant your request? She eyed the harpoon gun again. What do I get out of it? Nothing. If you won't help us, why can't we just take a scale from our own tails? Stupid girl. Neither you nor Xavier are full-blooded mermaids. Her glare could curl paint. I'll ask you again. What's in it for me? I believe I can help you on that score. Xavier floated away from the floral covered sofa and wedged himself between the women. If Sophia puts in a good word with the portal master on your behalf, would you be persuaded to give us the scale? You must have me mistaken with someone else, Sophia hissed at the werewolf. All earlier passion gone. In case you haven't been listening to me for the past 2 days, I do not have any pull with Sterling. She maneuvered past Xavier but kept a wary eye on Renn. Impalement wasn't on her agenda today. The power of suggestion and persuasion is inside you at all times. Xavier's lips curved slightly with a grin. Or channel your inner diva like you do with me. Men are weak creatures. Renn scoffed and waved a hand in dismissal. I've had ample opportunity to lure brainless golfers down to the depths of my lake. But I find hiding dead bodies becomes a chore after the first 4 or 5. A serial killer. Sophia blinked at the mermaid. She wasn't surprised since in the old stories mermaids did lure sailors to their deaths for fun. Renn, I understand your plight, I do, but you've met Sterling. He's a hard, desperate, grasping man who'll stop at nothing to further his own agenda. A peon such as me couldn't influence him. That's too bad. Renn moved to a shelf and lifted the lid from a shell-studded box. I'd hate to see Xavier spend the rest of his life battling such a wretched affliction. Reaching into the box, she drew forth a small object, closed her fingers around it, hiding it from view. Sophia glanced at the werewolf and frowned at the question in his eye. I don't want him to remain a shapeshifter. I want to. And why should you? Xavier is nothing to you but an inconvenience, a task that needs to be completed as quickly as possible. Renn swam behind Xavier and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. To someone like me, Xavier represents companionship, excitement, a change. She pressed the hidden object into his hand. Her fingers lingered on his. I warned you, Renn. Hands off. Sophia moved to take the item from him, but the mermaid blocked her. What did you give him? I have a right to know. You have no rights here under the water. This is my domain. She grinned, and this time it was not in amusement or happiness. Her face twisted subtly into a mask of superiority and madness. The potion you both drank earlier only lasts for 30 minutes. Once it wears off, you'll return to your original forms. Then we'll swim to the surface. Tendrils of panic curled around Sophia's spine to chill her skin. Renn had a loose screw. For one moment she regretted. Sterling hadn't sent her to a different realm. Right. She attempted to keep the hysteria out of her voice. A glance at Xavier revealed he stared intently at the object that rested in his palm. Ah, you could swim to the surface, but I can hold you here until your lungs fill with water and you drown. Such a tragedy, wouldn't you say? Just another dead, bloated body. She ran a hand along Xavier's jaw and smiled. I could save you, though. I won't leave Sophia. He detached the mermaid and moved to take up residence at Sophia's side. Breaking the curse is not as valuable to me as her life. Be serious, Xavier. What does she have that I don't? It isn't a question of what she has. It's what she is, mine. Xavier smiled and forced a small object into Sophia's hand. Regardless of what Sophia does for a living, she's mine, and I love her despite it. What? Sophia's jaw dropped as she stared at the golden-curled merman. I can help you break the curse. Sophia won't be much use to you dead. Her voice was soft and smooth, spreading through the water like dye. If Sophia isn't with me, then I'll be a wolf. He shrugged. The gesture rustled the necklace of shells. I've grown accustomed to the sickness. Warmth flooded her body. Xavier's intense gaze burned right through to her soul. He'd die for her without a second thought. In that moment, Sophia's mindset slowly began to change toward the werewolf. Was it love? No, but it was a beginning. She smiled, the silly, moony grin of a high school girl with her first crush. He and Renn still argued. Their voices faded into the background when she examined the object on her palm. A mermaid scale glowed with the life of its own, blood-red and glittering. Transfixed, she stared, moving it this way and that to try to catch the refracted sunlight. Her fascination lasted perhaps 10 seconds before stabbing pain shot through her body. What's happening? Sophia clutched her neck with one hand while keeping the other locked tightly around the scale. Shifting. Renn clamped a strong hand on Sophia's arm. I'd imagine you'll have approximately 5 minutes before total human organs are regained and functioning. If you remain here, you'll die. Her smile revealed sharp, pointy teeth and a forked tongue like that of a serpent. Let her go. Xavier attempted to break her grip on Sophia's arm, but Renn dragged her out of reach. Agony crossed his face. You have no cause to hold her. He clutched his neck as his gills undoubtedly started the same shutdown process. It would be fitting justice for what she's done. Please. Sophia's gills ceased to function. They no longer fluttered or filtered oxygen from the water. Her lungs burned. She couldn't breathe and, gasping for breath, only brought foul-tasting water into her mouth. I'll plead your case in Sterling's court. She thrust the scale into her purse, then clawed at Renn's hand. Please. Water tickled her nose. She gasped when her temporary mermaid tail split in two and the pieces fashioned themselves into human legs. Searing pain racked her body. She sank to her newly formed knees, shaking. She'll betray you, Renn remarked softly to the werewolf, but she loosened her grip on Sophia's arm. She's a gatekeeper. She can do no less. Xavier bowed his head, then lifted it. His amber eyes reflected sadness and sorrow. If it will be as you say, I'll face it head-on without shame or regret, and I'll do it by Sophia's side. I can do no less for her. He growled low in his throat as his own metamorphosis from fish to human began. I wish you well. Renn released her grip. She held the door open, silent as Xavier helped Sophia to her feet. If you change your mind and choose to ditch her, please seek me out. I'm sorry, Renn. Sophia's lungs heaved, burned with the need for oxygen, her legs painful and bloody. The mermaid inclined her head but didn't speak. Her brilliant green eyes were hollow and washed of all. Chapter 11. Inky clouds of blackness swirled through Sophia's vision as she stumbled down the steps of the bus, landing in the soft sand bottom of the lake. Her gills disappeared, her lungs threatened to explode. Xavier wrapped an arm around her waist and propelled her toward the surface. When the afternoon sunshine warmed her face, Sophia knew she was saved. Gasping life-giving oxygen into her lungs, she bobbed with the gentle current and listened as he sucked in air. Weak and shaking, she swam toward the small island in the center of the lake. Don't exert yourself, Xavier warned. She chose not to answer, but concentrated all of her energy reserves into reaching the shoreline. Stroke after stroke brought the island closer. After what seemed an eternity, her fingers found purchase on small loose pebbles and wet sand. With an exhausted cry, she let her lower half dangle in the water, while resting her upper half on solid ground. I hope you appreciate what I did for you, because I will not become a mermaid again. She pressed her cheek against the coolness of the pebbles and closed her eyes. Damn werewolf. As just my luck, the man I get to spend the rest of my life with has so many issues. True, yet my appreciation of you still lingers. What do you mean? Her eyes flew open to focus on her companion. Xavier had climbed out of the water and prowled with furtive steps about the perimeter of the island. With the exception of the shell necklace, the werewolf was naked, gloriously, wonderfully naked. Sophia's mouth dropped open. She gaped. His back was to her. The first thought that swirled into her brain was, how did his derriere become the lightly tanned color as the rest of him? Just how often did the man strut about unclothed, and in the daytime no less? Warmth spread into her nether regions as the urge to see the rest of him exerted itself. Xavier, you're naked. A second thought pushed out the first. If he'd lost his clothing because of shapeshifting, then that meant I might say the same of you. The October sun glanced off his still wet curls. Sophia swallowed as he turned slowly around. Forgetting she lounged in chilly water, she licked her dry lips and allowed her gaze to devour the expanse of his chest. Oh my God! Water droplets clung to the dark blonde hair and glistened over the shadow of his abdominal muscles. The ribbon of hair seemed to be a beacon, and she eagerly followed the narrowing path past his belly button to the damp nest of pubic hair. She sighed when she caught a quick glimpse of his manhood. Even in its resting state, he was a feast for the eyes. Sophia's fingers itched to touch it to see if it would be as velvety as it appeared. Her nipples pebbled as her body responded to such exciting stimulation. Are you quite finished? Humor ran through his voice as the question quivered in the air. While I'd be happy to model for you all afternoon, I feel I must remind you it's October and therefore quite cold. My attributes aren't as impressive as they would be if I were warm and dry. Plus you're still in the water. You caught me off guard. Her cheeks burned. She sank into the lake until only her head and shoulders were visible. I never expected, that is, I couldn't have imagined. I've never seen someone more. She would die right here in the water of embarrassment. God, he was gorgeous, and she wanted to spend the next hour or so looking her fill. Don't apologize. Xavier chuckled, then plucked a couple of thick white towels from a wooden box near the shore. There's no shame in admiring me. I'm your mate after all. It's your right. He deftly tucked a towel around his mid-section. I'd love to admire your human form. It's only fair since you've seen me. The look he threw her was decidedly wolf-like. That isn't going to happen. No matter that he was covered, small flames of desire ignited deep within her. She wanted him, even if she hadn't just seen him naked. His steadfast commitment to her burrowed into her heart, made itself comfortable, and tacked up a home sweet home sign. I hardly know you. It was a half-assed protest, and they both knew it. She tamped the flames until they resembled smoldering ruins. Was the last said for his benefit or hers? From what I've glimpsed of your body, you have nothing to be embarrassed about. He dangled the second towel in front of her, and his eyes shimmered with laughter. Come, let me assist you. A wolfish grin parted his lips. Clothed, not clothed, my desire for you remains the same. Why do I suddenly feel as if I'm Little Red Riding Hood, and you're the big bad wolf? She grinned up at him, and as much as she might enjoy being eaten, tiny smidge of guilt shot through her stomach. His amber eyes lightened into a brilliant citron. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to joke about your being a wolf. No harm done. He wiggled the towel again. If I promise to close my eyes, will you come out of the water? Sophia searched his face and found nothing except honesty and humor residing there. All right. If I catch you peeking, I won't speak to you again. Gee, sounded like a second grader. Well, I probably will, but I'll be mad. Fair enough. Xavier stroked his goatee with a slender finger. He made an exaggerated show of closing his eyes. Whenever you're ready. After hesitating 3 seconds, she scrambled out of the water and onto the pebbles. When her fingers closed over the soft terry cloth-like fabric, she heaved a sigh. You may open your eyes now. It's safe. She wrapped the towel loosely around her body, keeping her purse slung across her chest. Safe is a relative term. Xavier ran a finger over her exposed collarbone. This seems to be a rest stop midway through the course. I'll have to call for a boat to ferry us across to the mainland, but we can take advantage of the privacy we have now. Tempting. She shivered and clutched the towel tighter. He was charming and dangerous, and in light of recent events, he was hers. While that thought caused liquid heat to course through her body, in the back of her mind she couldn't forget he was a werewolf. She still had no concrete proof but somehow believed his story. She needed to tread carefully. What did you have in mind? I could do with a distraction as we wait on the ferry. In fact, it sounded like a very good idea. Let's start with a few kisses and see where the afternoon takes us. He led her toward the wooden dock. Not here. Sophia's laugh was throaty and soft when he tugged her into his arms and nuzzled her neck. Her towel slipped down a bit to expose half of a breast. Where then? Here. He dropped a feather-light kiss on the creamy skin of her shoulder. Hell no. She struggled in his embrace. No problem. I can kiss you here instead. He nibbled the hollow of her throat, swirled the tip of his tongue where his lips had just played. Better. Yes, I mean no. We've got bigger problems. Her laughter died and turned to icy cold fear as she spied a familiar form walking up the dock. Xavier. Hide. Sophia pushed him away. Her heart pounded against her ribcage in an attempt to flee. Her chest tightened with panic. It was too much too soon. After the stress of the afternoon, she couldn't calm down fast enough. Sophia implored Xavier to run as her limbs grew heavy and stiff until she became her true self. Slowly, and with the sound of bricks being stacked in a row, she transformed into a stone statue as Sterling came upon the scene.